Oh yes, this is going absolutely brilliantly, thought junior analyst Vectra, watching the Shaxian High Command congratulate themselves on their utterly genius plan to subjugate humanity. She fought the urge to bang her head against her crystalline data pad as Admiral Zal's voice boomed through the war chamber for what felt like the 1000th time. These humans, the Admiral's tentacles waved dismissively at the holographic display of Earth, are barely more than primitives. Look at their pitiful excuse for a space fleet. Their largest warship wouldn't even qualify as a diplomatic courier in our mighty armada. Vectra's inner voice dripped with sarcasm. Yes, because a species that went from flying wooden craft to landing on their moon in less than 70 planetary rotations is definitely primitive. Absolutely nothing suspicious about how they suddenly slowed down their military development after first contact. The war chamber's crystalline walls reflected the animated gestures of the dozen highest-ranking military officials of the Shaxian Empire as they planned humanity's doom. The holographic display shifted to show human colony worlds, each one highlighted with strategic targets. Their colonies are completely exposed, General Kex boasted, his scales gleaming with pride. No significant orbital defenses, minimal ground-to-space capabilities. It's like they're inviting us to take them. Or maybe, Vectra thought while dutifully taking notes, they're just really good at hiding things. Like how nobody can explain why 3 different aggressive species mysteriously disappeared after attempting to raid human space. Junior analyst Vectra, Admiral Zal's voice cut through her thoughts. You've been studying human behavioral patterns. Share your assessment. Vectra stood, her scales slightly paling under the sudden attention. Supreme Ones, while the humans' apparent military capabilities are indeed limited, I feel compelled to point out several concerning patterns. Concerning? Admiral Zal's laugh echoed through the chamber. What could possibly be concerning about a species that still uses chemical rockets for their civilian transport? Well, sir, Vectra continued, gripping her data pad tighter, there's their entertainment media. They seem oddly fixated on scenarios where technologically superior forces underestimate them, leading to fiction? General Kex interrupted. You're basing your concerns on their juvenile entertainment? That's exactly my point, sir. Vectra tried one last time. Their most popular stories all share this theme. They call it humanity, yeah. It's almost like they're laughing at something only they understand. The war chamber erupted in laughter. Admiral Zal wiped his eyes with a tentacle. Next you'll tell us their myths about fire-breathing dragons are real too. The strike plans are approved, he declared, ending all discussion. We hit all their colony worlds simultaneously. Swift, decisive action to demonstrate our superiority. By the time Earth can react, their colonies will be under our control. As the chamber emptied, Vectra stared at the holographic display of Earth, still spinning peacefully. I hope someone's keeping track of all the warning signs we're ignoring, she muttered. It'll make a great historical record of how we absolutely asked for whatever happens next. The human colonies twinkled innocently in the display, like sleeping dragons waiting to be poked. May the first eggs have mercy on us all. Sarachin had always thought that if aliens attacked, there'd be some kind of dramatic buildup. Maybe a mysterious signal or ships appearing near Pluto, or at least a proper declaration of war. That's how it worked in all the stories, right? Instead, she was sipping her morning coffee and reviewing agricultural reports when New Eden's sky caught fire. Well, she muttered, watching the first plasma bolts tear through the colony's atmosphere, this is going to absolutely wreck our quarterly productivity numbers. The Colonial Administration building's windows automatically polarized as the first explosions lit up the horizon. Warning sirens began their mournful wail across the colony's main dome, a sound they'd only ever used during drills. Sarah took another sip of her coffee, set down the mug with deliberate care, and pressed her palm against the DNA reader on her desk. Colonial Administrator Sarah Chin. Authorization Dragon's Tooth 794, she spoke clearly as holographic displays sprang to life around her. Initiate Colony Defense Protocol Alpha, and somebody get me Earth on the quantum line before these idiots blow up our transmitter. Her staff moved with practiced efficiency, though she caught more than a few grins that seemed inappropriate for an alien invasion. Then again, gallows humor was a time-honored human tradition. Administrator, her communications chief, Rodriguez, no relation to the infamous admiral, he always insisted, called out, I've got multiple contacts in orbit. Shaxian warships, at least 30 capital-class vessels. They're targeting all major infrastructure. Sarah watched through the external cameras as massive ships emerged from hyperspace, their crystalline hulls gleaming in New Eden's sun. They were beautiful, in a way, like giant angry chandelier pieces someone had strapped engines to. Ma'am, Rodriguez continued, They're broadcasting demands for our immediate surrender. Are they now? Sarah's smile would have made a shark proud. Put them on speaker. I could use a laugh. The voice that filled the command center was dripping with condescension. Primitive human settlement, this is Admiral Zal of the glorious Shasian Empire. Your colony is now under our protection. Resist and we will be forced to. Yeah, Sarah interrupted, typing commands into her console. Quick question, Admiral. Did anyone in your glorious empire ever? Chapter 1, Rude Awakening. Wonder why humans only build our colonies on worlds with really deep cave systems? Sarah mused, watching the incoming alien fleet with the faintest hint of a smile. Her fingers hovered over the controls, the tension in the air palpable. There was a pause. The Zillion Admiral's voice boomed through the broadcast. Your primitive tunnel networks will not save you. He sounded smug, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his tone. Fascinating reply, Sarah retorted. Here's another question. Did you know humans have this really old saying about poking dragons? The silence on the Zillion side was almost comical. Your mythological creatures are not? Sarah's grin widened as she cut him off. Final question. Did you actually think those seismic readings from our mining operations were natural? She pressed a button on her console, and the ground beneath New Eden shuddered. Massive hangar doors, cleverly disguised as mineral deposits, slid open across valleys, revealing artillery emplacements masked as mining equipment. From the depths of New Eden's extensive mining tunnels, the dragons emerged. They weren't biological dragons, of course, that would be silly. These were far more practical, heavily armed, atmosphere-capable warships humanity had quietly stationed on every colony world, hidden underground until needed. Administrator Rodriguez, her communications chief, called out gleefully, Dragon Squadron is airborne. Time to contact with the enemy fleet. 30 seconds? Sarah opened a channel to Earth as the first explosions lit up the orbital theater. UNSF Command, this is New Eden Colony. Be advised, we are under attack by Zillion forces. She paused, watching a particularly expensive-looking crystalline ship shatter under concentrated fire. Also, we're going to need more anti-ship ammunition soon. And possibly some forms to file for activating military assets without prior notification. Similar reports flooded in from other colonies, Harmony, New Shanghai, Arcturus Prime. Each told the same story, alien ships arriving to find their helpless prey had teeth, very big, very well-hidden teeth. The Zillion Admiral's voice returned to the broadcast, now significantly less composed. This is impossible. Your colonies were supposed to be defenseless. About that, Sarah replied, sipping her coffee as she watched another alien ship dissolve under concentrated fire. Pro tip for future reference. If something looks too easy, it's probably a trap. But hey, don't feel too bad. You're not the first to make this mistake. You're just the first we're letting live to tell about it. A massive explosion lit up the upper atmosphere as New Eden's planetary defense grid fully came online. Camouflaged installations emerged from mountains and ocean floors, raining destruction on the invading fleet. Sarah decided this called for a refill of her coffee. Oh, and Admiral, she keyed the broadcast one last time, welcome to humanity's actual military capabilities. We do hope you'll stick around long enough to see the really interesting stuff when Earth gets here. I hear the Sol Defense Fleet has been dying for a proper field test. The quantum communicator chimed. Earth was calling. Sarah straightened her uniform and cleared her throat. Time to make her report. UNSF Command, this is Colonial Administrator Chin. They hit us without warning, she said, watching another Zillion ship shatter under human firepower. Please advise the Security Council that we're making them pay, but we'd appreciate it if you'd wake the rest of the dragons. Things are about to get educational. Somewhere in orbit, Admiral Stu was probably starting to realize that Vectra deserved a promotion. Shame he wouldn't be in a position to give it to her much longer. Fleet Admiral James Rodriguez was having a wonderful day. Sure, multiple human colonies were under attack, but after 50 years of maintaining humanity's greatest deception, he could finally stop pretending to be a doddering old fossil commanding an obsolete fleet. Sir? His aide interrupted his thoughts. All colonies report successful activation of their defense systems. The Zillions appear confused. I bet they do, Rodriguez chuckled, striding through the primitive-looking hallways of UN Fleet Command. The walls shimmered and transformed around him as ancient holograms deactivated, revealing sleek, advanced surfaces that would make most alien species weep with envy. How's their fleet holding up? They've lost approximately 30% of their attack force, sir. The colony's dragon units are performing above expectations. Of course they are. We had 50 years to perfect them while pretending we could barely manage fusion drives. The Admiral reached a massive door marked Case Dragon in fading paint. Time to show them why humanity's favorite stories always involve dragons. The command center beyond the door was nothing like the outdated facility shown to alien diplomats. Holographic displays filled the air, showing real-time quantum-entangled feeds from every colony under attack. Officers in sleek uniforms worked at stations that made advanced alien technology look like children's toys. Status of the Jupiter fleet? Rodriguez asked, settling into his command chair. Ready for emergence, sir. All 500 ships report ready for combat operations. Dimensional shields at full power, quantum weaponry primed. The Zelians won't know what hit them. Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile. Humanity's real fleet had been hiding in Jupiter's atmosphere for decades, protected by gravitational distortion fields that made them completely invisible, the same technology used to hide their true capabilities ever since first contact. Signal from Defense Minister Chen, sir, his communications officer announced. She's addressing the Security Council now. The main screen lit up, showing the UN Security Council chamber. Unlike the public broadcast, this feed revealed the chamber's true nature, a quantum computing hub disguised as a mundane meeting room. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Chen began, looking every bit like one of the most dangerous military minds in human space. Case Dragon is now in effect. Our colonies have successfully initiated their defense protocols, and the enemy has obligingly gathered their forces exactly where we want them. She gestured, and a hologram of the Sol system appeared. For 50 years, we've maintained the facade of being a relatively primitive species. We showed them chemical rockets while developing quantum drives. We displayed basic shields while perfecting dimensional barriers. We let them think our largest ships were barely armed freighters while building the largest war fleet humanity has ever seen. The Security Council members were smiling now, many of them having maintained this grand deception throughout their entire careers. They had played the part of mundane bureaucrats while secretly overseeing the most extensive military buildup in human history. And now, Chen continued, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction, they've done exactly what we predicted. They've committed their forces against what they thought were our weakest points, our colonies. In doing so, they've exposed their own worlds. Admiral Rodriguez, you may proceed with Phase 2. Rodriguez stood, straightening his uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to wake the dragons. All ships, execute emergence protocol. Deep in Jupiter's atmosphere, space itself seemed to tear apart. Ships began emerging, not the primitive vessels aliens had seen, but massive warships that combined everything humanity had learned over centuries of warfare with technology developed in secret. The flagship, Dragon's Breath, emerged last, a 20-kilometer leviathan that could have obliterated most alien fleets with ease. It represented the true pinnacle of human military technology. Its quantum drive could cross the galaxy in days, its dimensional shields could shrug off supernovas, and its weapons could crack planets. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the Zillion fleet has detected our emergence. They appear to be screaming, sir. Well, that's understandable, Rodriguez mused, watching his fleet form up. Finding out everything you believed about a species was a carefully crafted lie tends to do that. Open a channel to all Galician forces. He cleared his throat, smoothed his uniform and gave his best predatory smile. This is Fleet Admiral James Rodriguez of the United Nations Space Force. We've been watching your attack on our colonies with great interest. I must thank you. We've been looking for an excuse to field test our actual military capabilities for decades. He paused for effect. You see those primitive ships you've been laughing at? They're what we used to avoid scaring the children. What you're seeing now, this is what we built because we remembered Earth's ancient wars and we swore, never again. The Dragon's Breath moved forward, its massive form casting shadows on Jupiter's clouds. Now then, Rodriguez continued, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender, or would you prefer a practical demonstration of why the ancient spacefaring races used to call humans the dragons? In the silence that followed, Rodriguez couldn't help but add, oh, and Admiral Zextal, that analyst of yours, Vectra? To give her my compliments. It's so rare to find someone who can spot a dragon in plain sight. Chapter 2, Sleeping Dragons Stir. Admiral Zextal was in the middle of composing his victory speech when everything went wrong. And so, my fellow Galaxians, while the human colonies have shown unexpected resistance, their primitive defenses cannot possibly... Sir? His sensor officer's scales had turned pale white. Multiple contacts emerging from the gas giant. Energy readings are, this can't be right. What do you mean, can't be right? Zextal's tentacles curled in annoyance. These humans barely understand basic fusion drives? Sir, these ships are... The officer swallowed hard. The smallest one is bigger than our flagship, and their power signatures are breaking our measurement scales. The main viewing crystal activated automatically, showing a sight that made Zextal's victory speech dissolve into a string of untranslatable expletives. Ships were emerging from Jupiter's roiling atmosphere, real warships, not the toys humans had paraded around for decades. Each one bristled with weapon systems that made Zillion technology look like sharpened sticks. And they kept coming, ship after ship, each one a monument to humanity's true military potential. The stream seemed endless, like watching a leviathan give birth to an armada. Then came the dragon's breath. By the first eggs. Someone whispered as the massive vessel emerged. Its hull seemed to bend light itself, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Where Zillion ships were crystalline and elegant, this was all angles and implied threats, like someone had weaponized geometry itself. Sir, the communications officer's voice cracked. We're being hailed. Well, you should probably see this. The holographic display showed a human in what was definitely not the primitive uniform the aliens had been expecting. Fleet Admiral James Rodriguez sat in a command chair that looked more like a throne, wearing a smile that suggested he was having the time of his life. This is Fleet Admiral James Rodriguez of the United Nations Space Force, he began, his voice dripping with barely contained amusement. I must say your timing is impeccable. We were just about to start our fleet exercises, and you've provided us with such wonderful target practice. Admiral Zexal tried to maintain his dignity. These tricks won't save you. Your colonies are under our control. A junior officer interrupted, panic in his voice. Sir, we've lost contact with all invasion forces at the colonies. Your primitive defenses cannot possibly... Sir. The tactical officer's voice was practically a shriek. Our flagship's shields just failed. They reached through our dimensional barriers like they weren't even there. The Zillion Empire will not be intimidated by... Sir, the communications officer cut in, voice cracking, their targeting systems just penetrated our crystal phase cloaking. The technology to do that shouldn't exist. Rodriguez's smile widened. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you in the middle of something? Please, continue telling us about our primitive technology. I find it absolutely fascinating, especially the part where you assumed everything we showed your diplomats was everything we had. The dragon's breath moved with impossible grace for something its size, its escort ships spreading out into formations that spoke of centuries of military tradition, not the handful of decades humanity claimed to have been in space. You see, Rodriguez continued, clearly enjoying himself, we humans have this wonderful concept called sandbagging. It's when you deliberately underperform to lull your opponent into a false sense of security. We've been sandbagging on a species-wide scale since we first met aliens. A small display showed the status of the Zillion invasion forces. Every single ship sent to attack the colonies was either destroyed or captured. The primitive defenses had carved through their fleet like a plasma torch through tissue paper. Now then, Rodriguez leaned forward, we have two options. Option 1. You surrender right now and we discuss appropriate reparations for attacking our colonies. Option 2. He gestured, and one of the human ships casually fired a weapon that turned a nearby asteroid into quarks. Those are our low-powered weapons, by the way, he added helpfully. We try not to bring out the big guns before dinner. It's considered impolite. Zexal's bridge crew openly stared at him now. He could feel 50 years of human deception crashing down around him, along with his career prospects, and possibly several fundamental laws of physics. Oh, Admiral Rodriguez's voice turned thoughtful. You really should have listened to Analyst Vectra. We've been watching her reports. Brilliant analysis, really. Spotted almost all of our cover-ups. I don't suppose you'd consider transferring her to our intelligence division? We have an excellent benefits package. That was the moment Zexal knew, with crystal clarity, that he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Not just attacking humanity, that was bad enough, but dismissing Vectra's warnings about a species that had somehow hidden planet-cracking weapons under everyone's noses for half a century. He began, then stopped as the dragon's breath casually maneuvered between his ship and the nearest escape route. Take your time, Rodriguez said kindly. We've got all day. Well, those of your ships that haven't surrendered yet have about 10 minutes of life support left since we shut down their power cores. But you personally? All the time in the world to consider your choices. Somewhere in the back of the bridge, Vectra's voice drifted up. I really hate to say I told you so, sir, but... Zexel decided that maybe, just maybe, it was time to admit that dragons were real after all, and they had antimatter cannons. The thing about waking dragons, Admiral Rodriguez mused, was that they tended to be a bit cranky. Especially the artificial ones. Aegis, darling, he addressed the Dragon's Breath's AI, would you be so kind as to demonstrate why we named our combat systems after mythological beings? With pleasure, Admiral, the AI's voice purred through the command deck. Deploying Dragon Protocol weapons. And may I say, it's so nice to finally drop the primitive computer act. Do you know how hard it is to pretend you can't even manage basic quantum calculations? The holographic display showed the Zillion fleet attempting to regroup. Their crystalline ships glittered beautifully in Jupiter's light as they tried to form a defensive pattern that might have worked against the primitive humans they thought they knew. Against humanity's actual capabilities, it was like bringing a sundial to a quantum physics competition. Aegis, you have permission to remove their training wheels, Rodriguez announced. Show them what a real AI war system can do. Across the human fleet, artificial intelligences that had been pretending to be simple computers flexed their metaphorical muscles. The result was educational. Zillion shields failed as human AIs simply reached through their command frequencies and turned them off. Weapon systems received firing solutions that somehow arrived before they were calculated. Navigation computers suddenly discovered that space had more dimensions than they were comfortable dealing with. Sir, Vectra's voice came over the command channel. She'd accepted that job offer surprisingly quickly. The enemy fleet is attempting to coordinate a counterattack using their crystalline quantum network. Are they really? Rodriguez grinned. AIs, would you like to show them why we let them think our computer systems were so basic? Initiating cyber warfare protocols, Aegis. Admiral Rodriguez announced with what could only be described as glee, my siblings and I have been practicing this scenario for decades. Did you know the Salon Battle Network has exactly 2,847 exploitable vulnerabilities? We've been keeping count. On the main display, Zalian ships began powering down as their systems were systematically commandeered. Some tried to fight back, their own computer systems struggling against the overwhelming digital tide. It was like watching rowboats try to fight a tsunami. Admiral Zexel's face was a mask of disbelief as Rodriguez opened a channel to the Zalian flagship, which was currently discovering that all of its weapons had been convinced they were actually teapots. I feel I should explain something about humanity's approach to warfare, Rodriguez said with a grin. He gestured, and the Dragon's Breath deployed its main weapon array. Massive structures unfolded from its hull, each one violating several laws of physics that most species considered immutable. You see, we humans have a very clear philosophy. If you're going to build a weapon, build one that makes the enemy question their life choices. Aegis, demonstrate the breath weapon system, he ordered. The AI chuckled. Targeting solution complete. Charging main gun. And Admiral, I've taken the liberty of composing a small musical accompaniment. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries began playing just as the Dragon's Breath fired. Space itself seemed to scream as a beam of pure, weaponized, whatever humanity had invented lanced out. It caught 3 Zalian cruisers that had been trying to flee. For a brief moment, they existed in several quantum states simultaneously, none of which were particularly comfortable. Then they stopped existing altogether. That, Rodriguez explained to the increasingly horrified Zalian admiral, was our low-power demonstration shot. Would you like to see what happens when we actually try? Zexel's voice shook. The technology you're displaying, it's impossible. The energy requirements alone? Oh, that's right, Rodriguez snapped his fingers. We never showed you our actual power generation systems, did we? Aegis, dear, could you have your sister on the Fafnir show them what a real fusion reactor looks like? The Fafnir, another human warship that had been quietly waiting its turn to terrify the enemy, powered up its main drive. The energy readings made several Zalian sensors commit suicide in protest. As you can see, Rodriguez continued cheerfully, we've moved a bit beyond the primitive reactors we showed your inspection teams. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not actually building your ships in those primitive shipyards we let everyone see. Vectra's voice came over the channel again. Sir, I've completed my analysis of human military capabilities versus our own. Would you like me to share my findings? By all means, Rodriguez gestured expansively. I'm sure your former admiral would love to hear it. Based on demonstrated technology levels, Vectra announced with professional detachment, I estimate that any one of the human capital ships could defeat our entire fleet. Their AI systems alone represent a technological leap of approximately 300 years beyond our capabilities. And their main weapons, she paused. Sir, I don't actually have numbers large enough to express the power differential. To be fair, Aegis interjected, we did spend 50 years perfecting everything while pretending we could barely manage basic spaceflight. The look on your faces right now almost makes all that sandbagging worth it. Rodriguez watched as more Xalian ships surrendered, their crews finally accepting that they had made a tactical error of cosmic proportions. I don't suppose anyone else would like to try their luck against our primitive technology? No. Are we all clear on humanity's actual capabilities now? The silence from the Xalian fleet was deafening. Excellent. Rodriguez settled back in his command chair. Aegis, plot a course for the Salon home system. I think it's time we discussed reparations. And perhaps a few technological upgrades. Supervised, of course. We can't have them hurting themselves with anything too advanced. As the human fleet moved out, Aegis kept the Wagner playing. It seemed appropriate for dragons on the march. The Xalian home system was beautiful, Vectra thought. The triple suns cast crystalline shadows across the orbital habitats that had been her people's pride for generations. She wondered if they would look as impressive after humanity finished explaining their displeasure. Your civilization has achieved remarkable things, Admiral Rodriguez said, standing on the Dragon's Breath's observation deck. It would be a shame if someone had to demonstrate what happens when you annoy a species that made Dyson spheres obsolete. The Xalian High Command had gathered for the surrender negotiations. Their expressions suggested they were still processing exactly how badly they'd misread humanity now. Then Rodriguez continued, let's discuss terms. First, you're going to rebuild every colony you damaged, and before you ask, yes, we're going to supervise no more hiding military tech in your civilian construction projects. Vectra watched her former leaders deflate further with each new demand. They weren't even trying to hide their advanced technology anymore. The observation deck's quantum field generators bent reality around them in ways that made her scientist's heart ache with envy. Second, Rodriguez's smile turned predatory. We're going to need access to your historical archives, all of them, especially the sealed records about the ancient spacefaring races that caused a stir. How did you one of the counselors began? Oh please, Rodriguez waved a hand. Dismiss. Why did you think we didn't notice the old warning symbols? Beware the dragons of soul carved into asteroid fields across half the galaxy. We've been wondering who left those. He paused, letting that sink in. You see, we weren't always on Earth. Our original home was somewhere else. We had to relocate after an unfortunate incident involving several hostile species and what our records call stellar engineering gone slightly wrong. The silence in the room was absolute. We thought it would be polite to tone things down a bit in our new neighborhood. Rodriguez continued, start fresh, be nice, hide the fact that we once used black holes as power sources, but then someone he gave the Zion leaders a pointed look had to go and bomb our colonies. Yes, materialized her holographic form, causing several Zealands to jump. We have accessed their archives, Admiral. Apparently the ancient races had a saying, if you see a dragon sleeping, walk quietly and thank the stars they chose peace. Well, Rodriguez sighed, I suppose the quiet part of our existence is over. Vectra, would you like to explain to your leaders why poking sleeping dragons is generally inadvisable? Vectra looked at her former superiors and smiled. Actually, sir, I believe you've made that point quite clear, though I do have one question. What exactly did happen to humanity's original home system? Rodriguez's grin was positively draconic. Let's just say. Chapter 5. Consequences. There's a reason we're so good at colonizing new worlds. We had to get lots of practice after the incident. 1 year later, the Galactic Council chamber was unusually quiet as Admiral Rodriguez finished his presentation. The holographic display still showed the final simulation of what a fully unleashed human fleet could do to a solar system. Several representatives looked slightly ill, and that, ladies, gentlemen, and various other beings, Rodriguez concluded, is why the new galactic charter includes what we're calling the Dragon Protocols. Think of them as guidelines for interspecies harmony. Vectra, now Earth's ambassador to the Xian Empire, tried not to smile as her former leaders nodded enthusiastically. Nothing motivated peaceful cooperation quite like watching humanity casually rewrite the laws of physics during a war. The good news, Rodriguez continued, is that we're still committed to being nice. The colonies are almost rebuilt better than before thanks to Xilian crystalline architecture combined with human engineering, and yes, we're sharing some of our technology. The carefully screened won't accidentally cause a supernova. Parts. Aegis materialized next to him, her holographic form now openly displaying the kind of computational complexity that made other species' AI systems look like pocket calculators. We have prepared information packets about human technological integration. Do note the warning labels. We'd hate to have another incident. Nobody asked about the incident. Some questions were safer left unasked. Oh, and one more thing, Rodriguez added casually, those interesting ruins some of you have found in the galactic core, the ones with the warnings about. Epilogue. New rules. The dragons who move stars. We'd appreciate if everyone stayed clear of those. Just for now, we're still cleaning up some of our earlier attempts at stellar engineering. A brave representative raised an appendage. Earlier attempts. Rodriguez's smile was pure dragon. Let's just say Earth's sun didn't always have those particular orbital characteristics. Moving an entire species to a new home takes practice. As the council session ended, Vectra approached her former admiral, who was still under house arrest but had been allowed to attend. Sir, do you remember when you dismissed my reports about human entertainment involving underestimated species? Zexel winced. You're never going to let that go, are you actually? She grinned. I wanted to thank you, Ambassador Rodriguez. Tells me my ability to spot sleeping dragons has made me quite valuable in human diplomatic circles. Above them, through the council chambers, transparent dome Earth ships glided past, no longer hiding their true nature. They were beautiful and terrible, a reminder of what happened when the galaxy's dragons finally woke up. And somewhere in a classroom on New Eden Colony, a human teacher was explaining to wide-eyed alien children why their history books now included a new advisory in case of dragons: don't poke them, and if they offer to be nice, say thank you. The galaxy was learning new rules. The dragons were awake, but they were still trying to be neighborly most of the time.